Peace and Pan-Africanism. Good Garvey Day, brothers and sisters. Peace and Pan-Africanism. Good Garvey Day, brothers and sisters. Peace and Pan-Africanism. I want to pick up where we left off. Black America since the good Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And we are still in the decade of the 1970s. Black America since King, the 1970s, part 2. Brothers and sisters, February 29th, 1968, the Kerner Commission report was released. 462 pages. A study on the causes of the 1967 long, hot summer of race riots. The Kerner Commission found 5 things, among many others. Number 1, black frustration due to a lack of fair housing, education, social services, and a racist media. I'm quoting from the Kerner Commission. These are direct quotes. Number 2, white institutions created it, the ghetto. White institutions maintain it, the ghetto. White institutions condone it, the ghetto. Let's say it again. Quote, white institutions created it. White institutions maintain it. White institutions condone it. Number 3, quote, the Kerner Commission said America is moving into 2 societies, one black, one white, separate and unequal. 4, quote, the solution was to create jobs and diversify the police force. Number 5, quote, the Kerner Commission said it predicted that most major cities would be majority black by 1985. Now, this came out on February 29th, 1968, but it predicted that most major cities would be black by 1985, a point that must be considered when we look at the current gentrification movement to cleanse the inner cities of Black America. And one of the ways you have to cleanse the inner city of Black America is you have to make sure there are no jobs in the inner cities. Let me say that again. You have to make sure there are no opportunities in the inner city. So in order to get black people out of the inner city, you must turn them into ghettos. Let me say it again. In order to get rid of black people out of the inner cities of America, you have to turn those inner cities into ghettos. So they never intended to empower New York City's inner cities. They never intended to empower Philadelphia's inner city. They never intended to empower Detroit and Milwaukee or Chicago's inner cities. They never intended to empower Baltimore or Raleigh or Durham, Atlanta. They never intended to empower the inner cities of Black America, because had they empowered the inner cities of Black America, it would have been impossible to gentrify black people. But there's something else I want you to pay attention to. There's something else I want you to pay attention to. There's something else I want you to pay attention to that I want to speak on right now. And that is the fact, brothers and sisters, that in addition to the Kerner report, which I believe is one of the single greatest motivations for Dr. King's assassination on April the 4th, because the Kerner Commission would give Dr. King everything he needed. The Kerner Commission would give Dr. King all the ammunition he needed for his upcoming economic revolution, his upcoming breadbasket campaign, brothers and sisters. So Dr. King had to die because the Kerner Commission report was released. Dr. King had to die because the Kerner Commission report was released. But there's something else I want to turn your attention to. And the other thing I want to turn your attention to is the fact that on June the 12th, 1967, on June the 12th, 1967, on June the 12th, 1967, the United States Supreme Court, in a case known as Loving versus Virginia, would give birth to the Snow Bunny crisis. On June the 12th of 1967, 10 months before Dr. King was assassinated. On June the 12th, 1967, 10 months before Dr. King was assassinated. On June the 12th, 1967, 10 months before Dr. King was assassinated, the United States Supreme Court would give birth to the Snow Bunny crisis in a case known as Loving versus Virginia. In a case known as Loving versus Virginia, the United States Supreme Court would strike down all remaining laws that would prevent interracial marriage. Let me say this again. I'm giving you the history of Black America according to the Prince of Pan-Africanism. I'm giving you the history of Black America according to the Prince of Pan-Africanism. On June the 12th of 1967, the United States Supreme Court would give birth to the Snow Bunny crisis in a famous case known as Loving versus Virginia. A white man, a European, a Caucasian by the name of Loving would sue for the right to marry a black woman. A white man by the name of Loving would sue for the right to marry a black woman. He was arrested in 1958 for daring to marry this black woman. Virginia had a racial integrity law. The state of Virginia had a racial integrity law that didn't allow blacks and whites to get married or cohabitate. When Loving married the black woman, he violated the Virginia racial integrity law. He went to jail for 1 year. He sued the Virginia Supreme Court. He sued at the Virginia Supreme Court and he lost. So he took the case to the U.S. Supreme Court. He took the case to the U.S. Supreme Court. And after taking the case to the U.S. Supreme Court on June the 12th of 1967, on June the 12th, 1967, the Supreme Court outlawed all anti-interracial marriage laws in America. On June the 12th, 1967, the Supreme Court outlawed all remaining anti-interracial marriage laws. All anti-miscegenation laws were ruled unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court on June the 7th, 1967. Why is this relevant? Why is this relevant? The reason the Loving decision is relevant, the reason the U.S. Supreme Court's Loving decision is relevant, which gave birth to the modern Snow Bunny crisis, which gave birth to the modern Snow Bunny crisis, the reason it is relevant is many white people, especially in the southern states, many Europeans, especially in the southern states, blamed Dr. King for the Supreme Court's decision. I'm going to say it again. Part of the motivation to kill Dr. King came from the Loving decision. The government was concerned about economic revolution, but the poor white man and the working class white man was concerned about social revolution. The government killed Dr. King for economic revolution, but the poor white man blamed King for the social revolution that the loving decision would give birth to. So one of the reasons white folks became so possessed with undermining Dr. King in the South was they blamed Dr. King for the loving decision that the Supreme Court gave birth to. Dr. King had nothing to do with it. Dr. King had nothing to do with it. Dr. King had nothing to do with it except for the fact that his I Have a Dream speech, except for the fact that his I Have a Dream speech did say he looked forward to an America where little white boys and little white girls could hold hands. He did say in the I Have a Dream speech on the March on Washington, 1963 March on Washington, he did say he hoped little white boys and little white and black, little white girls and little black girls and little white boys and little black boys could hold hands. That's all Dr. King said. But Dr. King's agenda was not to push interracial marriage. Dr. King's agenda was not to push interracial marriage, but because he fought for desegregation of public accommodations. Any integrationist progress, any integrationist decisions, any integrationist laws would automatically be blamed on Dr. King. So the loving decision on June 12th of 1967, along with the release of the Kerner Commission on February 29th of 1968 that would give Dr. King all the ammunition he would need to lead his economic revolution, along with the fact that he was moving towards a greater embrace of revolutionary grassroots activism. Dr. King was moving towards a greater embrace of grassroots revolutionary activism. They had to kill our brother. They had to kill our brother. They had to kill our brother. Now, right after they killed Dr. King, Dr. King's murder would ignite 100 riots in over 100 cities. Dr. King's murder, his assassination by the United States government, would trigger over 100 riots in 100 different cities. So America burned in 67 with the race riots led by Detroit and Newark. And then America would burn the next year in 1968 with the race riots that came as a result of Dr. King's assassination. The Dr. King riots. The Dr. King riots would slightly edge out the 1967 riots. The Dr. King riots were considered the most significant social unrest since the Civil War. The 1967 riots were also considered the most significant riots since the 1863 Civil War draft riots of New York. The Dr. King assassination riots were considered the most significant social unrest in America since the Civil War itself. That was April 4th. But they were not done killing black leaders. That was April 4th. But they were not done killing black leaders. That was April 4th. But they were not done killing black leaders. 2 days after they murdered Dr. King. 2 days after they murdered Dr. King on April 4th, they would murder little Bobby Hutton on April 6th of the Black Panther Party. 2 days after they murdered Dr. King on April the 4th of 1968, they would murder little Bobby Hutton, the youngest founding member of the Black Panther Party for self-defense in Oakland. Little Bobby Hutton Little Bobby Hutton, the first recruit of Huey and Bobby. Little Bobby Hutton, the first recruit of Huey and Bobby and the first treasurer of the Black Panther Party. The first treasurer, Little Bobby Hutton, became the first martyr of the Black Panther movement and the post-Dr. King and post-Malcolm era, when he was shot 12 times by Oakland police, accompanied by Eldridge Cleaver. 2 weeks before his 18th birthday, they assassinated Dr. King and Little Bobby Hutton 48 hours apart. They assassinated Dr. King and Little Bobby Hutton 48 hours apart. Rest in peace. I will be coming to Oakland. I will be coming to Oakland. I will be coming to Oakland. Stand up, Bay Area. The Prince will be coming. Let's continue. Let's continue. On April the 26th, the Bilderbergers would meet in Canada. The Bilderbergers would meet in Canada. For those of you who don't know about the Bilderberg, it is the ruling secret society of the planet Earth. Greater than the Illuminati, greater than the Skull and Bones, greater than the House of Rothschild, greater than the Rockefeller Trilaterals. The Bilderbergs, founded at the hotel where they held their first meeting, Hotel de Bilderberg in France, I believe it was. I'm going to do a whole podcast, second season Dr. Papa podcast. I'm going to do a whole podcast on secret societies that matter. Because all y'all know is Illuminati. Illuminati don't run this planet no more. They still have influence, but the Illuminati does not have the power of the Bilderbergers. I'll do a whole podcast on secret societies that Africans need to know about. But let's get back to this. So the Bilderbergers would meet in 1968. And the Bilderberg meeting would focus on suppressing Black revolution in America and Africa. Let me say it again. The Bilderbergers would meet in Canada on April of 1968. And one of the agenda items was how to suppress Black revolution in America and in Africa. And also discuss how they could keep the Pan-African movement from undermining white supremacy. The Bilderbergers discuss how do you keep the Black American struggle from uniting with the Black African struggle. See, this is why ADOS is a reactionary anti-revolutionary movement. This is why FBA, fraudulent Black Americans, fake Black Americans, phony Black Americans, FBA, led by the Museum Coon. This is why that is an anti-revolutionary movement. Because the power structure that runs this planet, isn't concerned about metrosexuals opening up museums. The power structure that runs this planet isn't worried about metrosexuals open up museums. The power structure is worried about whether the Black American struggle will ever unite with the Black African struggle for a complete and comprehensive global Pan-African movement. That's what this is about. That's the only fear of global white power. Will the Black African and the Black American unite to liberate the African race? Will the Black American and the Black African unite to liberate the African race? They were talking about that in the 1960s. There was a national security memorandum that said we cannot let the American African and the continental African unite. We cannot let the American African and the continental African unite, brothers and sisters. That's what this is about. Don't let no metrosexual movie makers brainwash you about your agenda. Don't let no metrosexual movie makers brainwash you about what you should really be focused on, brothers and sisters. Now let us continue. On June 19th, 1968, on June 19th, 1968, on June 19th, 1968, the U.S. government gave Black America a Juneteenth gift. On Juneteenth, 1968, on Juneteenth, 1968, on Juneteenth, 1968, the United States government gave Black America a Juneteenth gift. What was the Juneteenth gift that the United States government gave Black America in 1968? What was the June 19th gift that Black America gave? Excuse me, what was the June 19th, 1968 gift that the U.S. government gave to Black America? On June 19th, 1968, the federal government passed the Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act of 1968. Please listen, this is important. Please listen, this is important. Listen up. What was the Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act of 1968? What was the Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act of 1968? It was a anti-crime bill. Anti-crime bill that was designed to reduce crime, coordinate law enforcement, increase the minimum gun age to 21, stop interstate gun trade, and it led to a 945% increase in incarceration. Y'all not listening. Y'all not listening. In order to undermine the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army, in order to undermine the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army in the aftermath of the Dr. King and Bobby Hutton murder, your U.S. Congress, the same Congress that won't give you the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, the same Congress that won't give you the George Floyd Police Accountability Act, gave you the Crime Control and Safe Streets Act of 1968. And the Crime Control and Safe Streets Act of 1968 increased incarceration 945%. Did y'all hear what I said? I'm going to say it again. The Crime Control Safe Streets Act that they passed right after they killed King and little Bobby Hutton to undermine the Black Power and Black Liberation Army, the Safe Streets Act of 1968 increased jail populations with Black people by 945%. It provided the police with new weapons. It gave them more police. It provided the police with more weapons. It gave them more police, more surveillance technology, and it increased the FBI budget. Why did they increase the FBI budget? You done killed Medgar. You done killed Malcolm. You done killed Martin. You done killed little Bobby Hutton. Why did you need to increase the FBI budget? Because they were going after the Panthers and they were going after the Black Liberation Army. Lyndon Baines Johnson, your Democratic president. Lyndon Baines Johnson, your Democratic president. Lyndon Baines Johnson, your Democratic president, is the reason the police have been militarized in the Black community. I'm going to say it again. Lyndon Baines Johnson, your Democratic president, is the reason the police have been militarized in the Black community. Let us continue. Let us continue. On May the 27th of 1968, the Supreme Court orders all states to dismantle segregated public schools, quote, from the root to the branch. The Supreme Court ordered all states on May 27, 1968 to dismantle segregated schooling from the root to the branch in 5 areas: staff, faculty, transportation, extracurricular activities, and facilities. Listen to this. On May the 27th, 1968, the United States Supreme Court ordered all states to dismantle segregated education from the root to the branch in the 5 areas of facilities, staff, faculty, transportation, and extracurricular activities. So let me ask you a question. If the Supreme Court, 78, 88, 98, 08, 18, 25 years ago, the Supreme Court ordered all schools desegregated from the root to the branch, why are the schools still segregated? 55 years later, the schools are still segregated. 55 years later, the schools are still segregated. 55 years later, the schools are still segregated. If the Supreme Court ordered on May 27th, 1968, that all states dismantle segregation from the root to the branch, why do most black children still go to segregated public schools? I thought the Supreme Court was the judicial branch of the U.S. government. So why aren't the schools integrated? Not that we want them to be, but I'm showing you the hypocrisy of American justice and law. Not that we want them to be, but I want to show you the hypocrisy of American justice and law. And then on June 6, 1968, the white power structure murdered Senator Robert F. Kennedy. The Attorney General was murdered on June 6, 1968. Murdered. White power structure murdered him. And then on August the 26th of 1968, Bobby Seale, co-founder of the Black Panther Party, at Chicago's Democratic National Convention, had a rally. And he was arrested along with 7 others known as the Chicago 8, sentenced to 4 years. They accused Bobby Seale of plotting to disrupt the Democratic National Convention. And then in September of 68, Huey Newton is convicted of killing a cop. Huey Newton is sentenced to 2 to 15 years. A new trial was ordered for Huey P. Newton, and his sentence was overturned, and he was released in 1970 after the California Court of Appeals reversed Huey P. Newton's conviction. On October the 12th of 1968, Equatorial Guinea gains its independence from Spain. Shout out to all my continental Africans from Equatorial Guinea who just celebrated your independence this past October 12th. We stand in solidarity with you. Equatorial Guinea, Black African power. Equatorial Guinea, peace and Pan-Africanism. All Africans on the continent, we are one people, one race, one nation, one family. October the 22nd, 1968, in order to further undermine the Black power and Black liberation movements. On October the 22nd, 1968, so this is the 55th anniversary of the Gun Control Act. October 22nd, 1968 to October 22nd, 2021. October the 22nd, 1968 to October the 22nd, 2021. The Gun Control Act. What was the Gun Control Act of 1968? What was the Gun Control Act of 1968? What was the Gun Control Act of 1968? The Gun Control Act of 1968 eliminated mail order guns, and it prevented felons and drug users and mental incompetence from buying and owning guns. Listen to me. Listen to me, family. Let me put my psychologist hat on for a hot minute. Let me put my psychologist hat on for a hot minute. Let me put my psychologist hat on for a hot minute. In order to further undermine the Black Panther Party and the Black liberation struggle, in order to further undermine the Black Panther Party and the Black liberation struggle, the government passed the Gun Control Act on October the 22nd of 1968, which stopped you from mailing guns, and it prevented a felon, drug user, or anyone deemed mentally incompetent from buying or owning guns. I'm going to say it again. Felons, drug users, and mental incompetence. This is still the law of the land. This is still the law of the land. Why is it important for us to know this, Dr. Umar? Why is it important for us to know this, Dr. Umar? Let me tell you why. They will lock up the Black Panthers. They would lock up the Black community activists. They would lock up the Black Liberation Army soldiers, charge them with a felony. And because they were charged with a felony, they could no longer carry arms. Do you see how this works? Do you see how this works? We're going to lock up the Black Panthers. We're going to lock up the Black community activists. We're going to lock up the Black Liberation Army soldiers. We're going to charge them with a felony. And once they're charged with a felony, they can't buy, sell, or use weapons. That's why they passed the Gun Control Act to disarm the Black community. To disarm the Black community. Also, if you are a drug addict, if you are on drugs that can lead to chemical dependence, you are not legally allowed to buy and own guns. So for all my brothers and sisters, taking Zoloft, taking Paxil, taking ADHD medications, taking anxiety medications, all of you taking psychiatric meds, all of you popping Xannies. Oh, yes. Oh, all of you giving your children Ritalin, all of you giving your children Adderall, all of you giving your children Concerta, all of you giving your children Metadate. I want you to know that if push comes to shove, I want you to know that if push comes to shove, they can use your son's ADHD diagnosis in childhood. They can use your daughter's depression diagnosis in childhood, and the fact you gave them childhood psychiatric meds, and the fact you gave them childhood psychiatric meds, and they can use that to refuse your son or daughter their constitutional right to carry arms and defend themselves. This is why ADHD is a trap. This is why conduct disorder is a trap. This is why disruptive behavior disorder is a trap. All these Black boys taking meds can be prevented from carrying arms to defend their queen and children. All these Black boys taking meds can be prevented once they become adults from carrying arms and defending their families. And all of you adults taking depression medicine, psychotic medicine, anxiety medicine, sleep medicine, any psychiatric med can be used to deny you your Fourth Amendment rights. Oh, yes. The right to carry arms. Which amendment is the right to carry arms? Which amendment is the right to carry arms? You can be denied that because you let some white teacher tell you your Black son need medication to get an education. Your son and daughter can be denied a right to defend their families, to buy and own firearms because you let a white teacher convince you that your child need medication to get an education. Y'all better understand, overstand, and understand me. Y'all better Second Amendment, thank you, Second Amendment right. Your child can be denied their Second Amendment right. Y'all better understand, overstand, and understand me. This is not a game. They know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. You get a felony, you can't carry. You take habit-forming psychiatric medications, you can't carry. Let's go to category number 3. Let's go to category number 3. Now let's go to category number 3. Under category number 3, mental incompetent. Mental incompetence cannot carry guns. Now, we can understand that with someone with paranoid schizophrenia. We can understand that with someone with severe and profound mental illness. We can understand that with someone with severe and profound intellectual disability. But let me say this. What about all those black boys and girls who were classified as retarded by the school psychologist unjustifiably? What about all the black children who were classified by the school psychologist under special ed as mentally retarded because their IQ score fell below 70, but who are not really mentally retarded? I hope y'all listening. I hope y'all listening. How many of you have children classified as intellectually disabled and you never challenged the diagnosis? How many of you have children classified as intellectually disabled but you never challenged the diagnosis? How many of you have children classified as intellectually disabled but you never challenged the classification? Do you know they can prevent your son or daughter from ever carrying a weapon when they become an adult? Your son or daughter, if they graduate high school and you did not undo that intellectual disability categorization, if they graduate high school and you did not undo that intellectual disability categorization, your son or daughter can be prevented for the rest of their life from carrying a gun because mom or dad let them get evaluated for special ed, let them get categorized as intellectually disabled, and you never challenged it. And you never challenged it. And you never challenged it. Brothers and sisters. Oops. Wait a minute. I blocked the wrong person. Wait a minute. Hold on, Octavia. I blocked the wrong person. Oh, man. Octavia Carter. That's my Facebook wife. I blocked her by accident. How do you unblock on Facebook? How do you unblock on Facebook? I accidentally blocked my Facebook wife. Octavia, we'll get it together though, Queen. Come to Instagram, Queen. I'm trying to find out how to unblock you. Wait a minute. Can I unblock you? Forgive me for the interruption. I accidentally blocked a supporter. I tried to block a coon and accidentally blocked a supporter while trying to block a coon. Oh, man. My apologies, Sister Octavia. Tell me how to unblock you. Tell me how to unblock you. But brothers and sisters, this is why Dr. Umar, does free review of intellectually disabled evaluation reports for black children. This is why Dr. Umar does free review of intellectually disabled evaluations for black children. This is why Dr. Umar does free review of intellectually disabled evaluations for black children. Don't let your child graduate. Don't let your child graduate from high school classified as intellectually disabled if they are not, because that can be used to prevent them from ever carrying a weapon. Let's continue. Gun Control Act, 1968. Felons, psychiatric drug users, and mental incompetence. They did that to undermine the black community's ability to resist police oppression. Also in 1968, J. Edgar Hoover called the original Black Panther Party. J. Edgar Hoover, right after they killed King the same year, called the Black Panther Party the greatest threat to the internal security of the country. The greatest threat to the internal security of the country. The greatest threat to the internal security of the country. And then in 1968, the Black Panther Party My heroes, the Black Panther Party. Our heroes, the Black Panther Party. Our ancestors and elders, because some of them are still here, had a free breakfast and clinic program. Free breakfast and clinic program. Free breakfast and clinic in the elementary schools was started by the Black Panther Party in the community in order to undermine the influence of the Black Panther Party. In order to undermine the influence of the Black Panther Party, the U.S. government started giving free breakfast in the schools. The government was not giving breakfast before the Panthers was giving breakfast. The government was not giving breakfast before the Panthers was giving breakfast. The government was not giving breakfast before the Panthers were giving breakfast. Brothers and sisters. Okay? It was the Black Panthers who started the free lunch. And to undermine the Panthers, the government started giving out free lunch. And the Panthers had clinics in the community, so the government started putting clinics in the high schools because the Panthers were doing it. The government copied the Panthers. Of course, Garvey did it even before them. But in recent times, it was the Panthers who was feeding our babies and giving out health care in the community. And to undermine the love that the Black community was having for the Panthers, the government started putting free breakfast and lunch in the schools with the health care clinics. And then in 1968, to appease Negroes, in 1968, in order to appease Negroes, your President Lyndon Baines Johnson, a Democrat, signed an executive order requiring affirmative action in hiring and government contracts for women, not for Black people, for women. See, this is the beginning of the feminism, modern feminism, which was invented and financed by the CIA. Modern feminism, which was invented and financed by the CIA. Modern feminism, invented and financed by the CIA. J. Edgar Hoover, Lyndon Baines Johnson in 68 signs the executive order requiring affirmative action in hiring and government contracts for women, not blacks, for women. You see that? So you already see Dr. King only been in the grave a few months. Dr. King only been in the grave a few months. Dr. King only been in the grave a few months, and they're already promoting the white woman's agenda above the Black community's agenda. They're already promoting. Dr. King only been dead 5 months. They're already promoting the woman's agenda over and above the Black community agenda. And then in 68, Henry Lewis became the first Black conductor of a major American orchestra. One thing you're going to see when we get into the 70s, they start giving Black people a lot of tokenism. They started giving Black people a lot of tokenism. Black faces in high places, Black faces in new places. Tokenism. Black faces in high places, Black faces in new places. Tokenism. Black faces in high places, Black faces in new places. They started giving us tokenism as a distraction from tokenism as a distraction from qualitative systemic change. We still fall for that strategy today. We still fall for that strategy today. We still fall for that strategy today. They'll give you a Barack Obama. They'll give you a Colin Powell, rest in peace. They'll give